Hello and welcome to There Can Be Only One. Every once in a while, two entries to the same IP end up with the exact same name. In this show, they go head to head so we can determine which deserves to keep the title. For today's matchup, it's The Thing versus The Thing. Let's see which one comes out on top, as there can be only one The Thing. The Thing's origins lie in the 1938 novella Who Goes There, written by John W. Campbell. The 1951 film The Thing from Another World, directed by Christian Nyby, very loosely borrowed some elements from the novella, but the differences were stark enough for Universal Studios to want a film adaptation that stuck closer to the source material. And the result was the 1982 film The Thing, directed by John Carpenter. Of course, Universal wasn't going to stop there. In the midst of the ongoing frenzy for reboots, prequels, sequels, reimaginings, and so on, Universal ordered the 2011 film The Thing, directed by Matthijs van Heiningen Jr., and that's how we ended up with two The Things. Before we get started, I'll go ahead and warn you that in addition to spoiling both The Things, I'm also going to be spoiling some of The Thing from Another World and Who Goes There. I don't actually think there's much to spoil in any of those, because none of them really operate on surprise, but the bottom line is that if you're interested in any of them, you should go ahead and get through them first. Additionally, there's a lot of blood in these movies. In my personal opinion, it's actually pretty palatable, and doesn't seem to be there just to be shocking or disturbing, but even still, it's a lot. So if you're queasy, I'd sit this one out, and if you're like eating or something, I'd at least finish that up first. Okay, let's get started with The Thing. Hey, a cute doggy. Now would be a good time to mention the website doesthedogdie.com, which describes itself as a collection of crowdsourced emotional spoilers. It's a good way of screening out movies you're interested in if they end up handling something you're sensitive about. Personally, I don't really care, and I just want a movie to offer whatever it's going to offer without any spoilers, but that's not true for everybody, and this site is pretty good about warning you what to be prepared for without spoiling any more than it needs to. As for whether or not the dog dies in The Thing, well... Anyway, probably my favorite thing about The Thing is its pacing. It's slow. This intro is especially great because it raises so many questions. What's up with that dog? Why are the Norwegians trying to kill it? What happened at their camp? What did they find in the ice? What'd they bring back and thaw out? And the characters are just as confused and unsettled as we are. The first entire quarter of the film is oozing with mystery and foreboding, and if you don't already know what The Thing is about, it's extremely captivating. It kind of reminds me of The Matrix. The opening sequence in The Matrix is pretty inexplicable if you don't know what the premise of The Matrix is. If you're just expecting these guys to be normal federal agents and Trinity to be a normal human being, this is pretty bizarre. And it implies a depth to what's going on that you simply don't understand yet. That's a major theme of both The Matrix and The Thing's introductions, but they both run into pretty major problems. Just about everybody knows what the premise of The Matrix is, so they already know why Trinity and the agents can do this. And The Thing is doubly pre-spoiled because it gives the game away in its own title sequence. The intrigue would be off the charts for someone who knew nothing about this movie, but now they can just go, oh, it's aliens. The whole time.
Thousands of years ago it crashes and this thing gets thrown out or crawls out and it ends up freezing in the ice.
I just cannot believe any of this voodoo bullshit.
Charles, happens all the time, man. They're falling out of the skies like flies.
The alien doesn't even reveal itself until the end of the first quarter of the movie. And let's take a moment to appreciate the enormous talents of this dog actor. It's fucking creepy. This shot especially totally sells it for me. But even once the alien is revealed, the movie doesn't immediately switch gears. It still spends the next quarter establishing the conflict and letting the characters' paranoia simmer a bit. We're halfway through the movie by the time MacReady says the famous line,
"Nobody trusts anybody now. We're all very tired."
And because the movie took its time to establish that, The line is totally earned. I think now would be a good time to confess something. I'm the world's worst horror fan. It's almost comical how horror affects me, or more accurately, how it doesn't. I don't really know why, but for whatever reason, I just don't feel the fright or the suspension that other people seem to when they watch horror or thriller movies. I can understand, like on a logical level, why characters feel scared or tense, but I don't feel it vicariously myself. Maybe I'm a psychopath? I don't know. One amusing result is that I don't usually know what classifies as horror or not. Back when I played through the Prey games, it didn't even occur to me that those were horror games until somebody else described them that way, well after I had beaten both games. Prey has a bus awash with spectral light full of ghost children, and I still didn't get that it's a horror game. I watched Midsommar, and the one word I kept using when I talked to my friend about it was refreshing. So yeah, generally speaking, I really like horror, but I never know when something is horror or not. I mean, the whole premise of the thing is that there's an alien in disguise doing murders, so you never know who to trust. But isn't that also the premise of almost every whodunit ever made? And those aren't usually horror movies, are they? What makes Prey or Psychoshock horror games instead of just another FPS? Is Doom a horror game? Anyway, the aspects of gothic fiction that I really tend to gravitate towards are compelling characters and dark, foreboding atmosphere. For reference, Midnight Mass is among the best horror I've ever seen. So, what about The Thing? Well, I wouldn't really say characters are a strong point here, but one thing it does absolutely get right is typage. Just looking around the base, you can see that this is a roster of people who are visually full of character. You can immediately get a feel for what each character's whole deal is just based on their appearance alone. You just need to take one look at Palmer to know he's gonna be trouble. This movie offers a veritable cornucopia of iconic 70s looks. Unfortunately, a lot of the characters' personalities, or even just temperaments, aren't particularly well established or explored. That's probably my biggest criticism of this movie, and it's honestly a minor one. I would have liked to see more interaction between MacReady and Childs. I mean, it goes without saying that more Keith David is more good, but it would also add more significance to the movie's ending, and it would give more context to this moment.
I guess you'll all feel a little easier if somebody else was in charge. I'll take it.
Like hell you will. There should be somebody a little more even-tempered, Childs.
As it is, we don't really have any reason to think that Childs has a shorter fuse than anyone else. I also think it's kind of weird how MacReady just is the hero. When introducing his character, the film basically just establishes that he's probably an alcoholic and kind of a jackass.
I move knight to rook 3.
Poor baby, you're starting to lose it, aren't you?
I move rook to knight 6. Checkmate. Checkmate.
Cheating bitch.
But right from the get-go, he's giving orders and people are following them.
Childs! Mac wants the flamethrower.
Mac wants the what?
That's what he said. Now move!
Damn it.
And then when the alien shows up, he knows exactly what to do just based on protagonist intuition. Now the movie strongly implies that he's seen some shit, but that doesn't really explain it all. I mean, he's not even the station commander. Gary is. And guess what? Gary still defers to MacReady, even though MacReady is just a helicopter pilot.
Gary, wait a minute!
That makes it completely inevitable then that MacReady would take charge instead of Gary, and it also totally undercuts the suspicion we the audience are supposed to have of MacReady when Fuchs finds his shredded jacket. Of course he wasn't actually thinged. This is MacReady we're talking about. Other than kinda accidentally solidifying MacReady as unthingable due to his protagonistic powers, the movie does an excellent job of making it impossible to discern who is thinged at any given time. I consider this kind of a fascinating choice. You might be tempted to map out the exact who, what, when, where of the assimilations, but the movie simply doesn't have enough information for you to actually do that. This contributes to the atmosphere of uncertainty by making it genuinely uncertain. The point of the movie isn't to figure out who is thinged. The point is that it's impossible to know who is thinged. Early on, a test is devised by Dr. Copper.
We could take a sample of each person's blood. We could mix it with uncontaminated blood. I suppose if there's a reaction, we'd know who isn't human.
We've got whole blood in storage.
But it turns out the uncontaminated blood needed for the test has been destroyed.
Was this broken into?
No, the lock is undamaged. Somebody opened it, closed it, and then locked it.
Great. Well, who's got access to it?
I guess I'm the only one.
And I got the only key.
So the group is pretty sure that at least one of them is a thing, but they have no way of determining which of them, if either, is actually innocent.
Could anybody have gotten it from you, Doc?
I don't see how. As soon as I'm finished, I return it right away.
Towards the end of the movie, MacReady finally devises a conclusive test, and this is the only point that we ever know exactly who is or isn't a thing.
You see, when a man bleeds, it's just tissue. The blood from one of you things won't obey when it's attacked. It'll try and survive. Crawl away from a hot needle, say.
And we learn that neither Gary nor Dr. Copper were actually assimilated. So who got to the blood for Copper's original test? Who knows? The movie simply does not give you enough information to figure that out conclusively. In fact, the only assimilation that we actually see that isn't done in plain view is Blair Thing killing Gary right at the very end of the movie. Every single other assimilation is done off screen, and both the audience and the characters can only speculate about what happened to Fuchs.
Maybe he tried to burn it. Maybe he burned himself before it could get to him.
The closest thing to a stealth assimilation we see is in the first act, when the dog thing walks into a room and we see the shadow of the lone man in that room turn to look at him. Maybe you'd be tempted to guess which character is getting assimilated here by identifying the silhouette. It looks like it could be Norris, who is revealed to be a thing later on, except the director thought of that, and so they subbed in the stunt director to play this part. This shadow doesn't actually belong to any of the main cast. Even the certainty of MacReady's hotwire test doesn't last long. It turns out that Blair is a thing, probably having been assimilated while locked up in the storage shed, and he's gone missing. And then while Blair is unaccounted for, Childs goes off on his own. Does he get thinged before the final scene? I would say almost certainly not, but ultimately the fate of MacReady and Childs is totally ambiguous. Although the characters talk about incoming rescue,
He wants to freeze now. He's got no way out of here. He just wants to go to sleep in the cold until the rescue team finds it.
the movie specifically tells us that they've been unable to contact anyone for weeks.
Look, I haven't been able to reach shit in 2 weeks. I doubt if anybody's talked to anybody on this entire continent.
And Blair destroys all means of communication and transportation to the outside world. So why do they believe rescue's on the way? Even if it is, will these characters survive the uninhabitable environment without shelter or supplies? Are one or both of them things? Who knows? So what to make of The Thing? Well, it's widely regarded as one of the greatest horror movies ever made, and, I don't know. I don't think I agree. Like I said, I don't really have much to criticize about it, and I've got plenty to praise, especially its ambiguity and deliberate pacing. But for whatever reason, this one just doesn't really click with me. Actually, there are a lot of classic horror films from this period that I don't particularly care for. Halloween and Alien both came out just a few years before The Thing, and while all three are generally considered all-time greats, they just don't really do it for me. Even though there's a lot that I can appreciate in each of them, I mostly just find them kind of boring. But given what I said about being the world's worst horror fan, that isn't exactly surprising. As you'd expect, much like the original, The Thing is a horror movie about a shape-shifting alien ravaging a base in the Antarctic. Now you might think that it's a reboot because it has the same name and premise, but actually, The Thing is a prequel to The Thing. Yeah, that's right. Not a reboot, not a reimagining. This is a prequel within the same chronology as the original The Thing. What an astonishing choice of name. I'm generally not into prequels, but it's for a different reason than what I usually see people talk about when they say that. I've honestly never totally understood the argument that prequels are inherently uninteresting because you know how they end if you've seen the original. I mean, I guess that's true, but isn't that also true of original movies that end up with sequels? Or, hey, a movie you've seen before? It's not less good just because you've seen it already. My issue with prequels is that they're often reverential to a fault to the original entry, and they often go to great lengths to specify origins of every little thing.
What? Who are your people?
I don't have people. I'm alone.
Solo.
Even if those explanations aren't bad, they're almost always unnecessary, unless they actually recontextualize the subject in an interesting way. And the thing is no different. Oh look, there's that fire axe. Oh look, there's Split Face. Okay, that one actually looks sick, so I'll give it a pass. Oh look, there's that smashed window pane. In the original, MacReady and Copper find someone who killed themselves, and in the prequel, it's revealed to have been Colin, but they just completely gave up in explaining it. It happens off-screen and for no apparent reason. Also, the discovery and subsequent destruction of the spaceship is totally incongruous with what we see in the original. Now, to be clear, I don't mind that incongruity at all. Actually, that's kind of my point. Nobody should care. Fealty to consistency is only going to get in the way. How these events are represented in this movie works well with this movie, and how they're represented in the original works well for the original. Just let them be inconsistent. Who cares? And if inconsistencies don't matter, then the entire structure of this movie probably shouldn't be built around consistently explaining every detail. This window pane didn't need to be broken in exactly the same way that we find it in the original, in the same way that it doesn't matter that this dog thing is played by a different dog than the one in the original. Anyway, remember how much I like the pacing in the original The Thing? Well, this The Thing has about the same running time, but it sure doesn't feel like it. It seems to me that a lot of older movies have a much better sense of how to pack their movie into a smaller time frame without making anything feel rushed. For example, I almost refuse to believe that The Third Man is only a measly 100 minutes. That movie gets so much done in that time, and at no point does it feel like it's rushing through things. If anything, the final chase scene almost seems to drag. I'm not sure what exactly is different really, but some newer movies tend to both run longer and almost inexplicably feel more rushed. In The Thing, 10 minutes have already passed by the time we even get to the Antarctic base, but what happens in those first 10 minutes? A whole lot of nothing. We get a dirty joke, the cold open, a weirdly standoffish recruitment of the main character.
I need to know a little bit about what it is I'm being asked to dig up.
There's a structure.
A structure? And I guess I don't have any time to think about this.
No, I'm sorry. I need your answer right now.
Well, I'm in.
An overlong sports ball joke.
I want to know how the Cavaliers are doing.
I don't follow football.
This basketball team. They play basketball.
Barely. They're the Cavaliers, man.
And finally we land. Do you see what I mean about how it feels rushed, even though it's taking its time? Another 5 minutes pass that are completely unnotable, and finally the movie actually gets started. Where the original was deliberate and atmospheric, this one just kind of fills time. Now's a good time to talk about The Thing from Another World, which, by the way, is just under 90 minutes and paced beautifully. Unlike the original The Thing from Another World has first-hand depictions of uncovering the UFO, accidentally destroying it, and thawing out the alien. But the alien doesn't have any of the shape-shifting abilities present in the novella or subsequent film adaptations, and it's really just a very strong and not particularly clever monster. The movie deals with the humans desperately, and usually futilely, confronting the monster, but the monster isn't even the main antagonist. The central conflict of that movie is actually between the main character and the lead scientist on the base. The scientist insists on preserving and studying the alien and its plant-like offspring, even though that would spell almost certain doom for humanity, while the main character insists on killing it, even though his superiors in the military order him to comply with the scientist. The nuclear analogy here is readily apparent, and this is a dynamic that I find really interesting. Scientists basically jumping at the chance to cause human harm if it results in new discoveries.
No emotions, no heart. Our superior in every way.
How can you be sure of our safety? Or more important, the safety of the world?
Think of 1,000 of such creatures, 10,000. Yes, it must be destroyed and its progeny along with it.
No.
It's a tried and true sci-fi concept, with Ash representing basically those same interests in Alien.
Perfect organism, unclouded by conscience, remorse, or delusions of morality.
But The Thing from Another World predates Alien by almost 30 years. So given that it's a strong theme for a sci-fi horror to lean on, and that this prequel, The Thing, would depict the unearthing of the alien, I think it'd be pretty clever to echo those themes from The Thing from Another World here. And it does do that. Kinda. It mostly just implies that the lead scientist would rather preserve the alien than mitigate risk, and there's no real back and forth conflict to it. Just a couple throwaway remarks.
It's fascinating. It is fascinating.
After emulating The Thing from Another World, the movie then starts to replicate the original The Thing, but it does so very clumsily. In the original, things were clever. Although we don't know who got thinged by the dog in the beginning, it clearly lied in wait for a long time before finally revealing itself. They also tried to frame MacReady. In this The Thing, things are extremely impulsive and seem to be unable to put together any kind of plan at all. When the helicopter is leaving to get Olav some medical attention, we're led to believe that Olav is thinged from being splattered with its blood. But the movie, surprises us by revealing that it's actually this guy who's the thing for some reason. And then the helicopter crashes. This is just a pointless bait and switch on the movie's part, but on the Thing's part, revealing itself now is obviously counterproductive and ultimately suicidal. Then, after Kate unsuccessfully tries to convince the camp of the danger that the Thing poses, the Juliet Thing casts aspersions on Colin, who's later confirmed to be a non-thing. This is crafty on the Juliet Thing's part, and nicely sets up the film to transition into the paranoid distrust that was central to the original The Thing, except then the Juliet Thing immediately turns into a monster and attacks Kate and this other guy in plain view. So I guess the sneaky plan is out the window, and that original lie is just pointless? We still do get some more echoes of that original distrust from The Thing, but it's handled in ways that almost feel like parody. As before, there's a proposed blood test, which is then immediately sabotaged. But this time around, Kate comes up with a new test on the spot.
I think there might be another way to tell. Good. Now, Lars has feelings. So he's human. It can't imitate inorganic material. Open your mouth. Open your mouth!
They're porcelain.
Go stand by Adam.
The theme of not knowing whom to trust doesn't last long, though, because soon every single thing reveals itself for no reason, and all but one of them are killed, so the movie just turns into a straightforward monster flick. So the film starts off by mimicking The Thing from Another World, then it spent some time mimicking The Thing, and now it's mimicking Alien. Those three movies are considered some of the best that the horror genre has to offer, so I guess they're a good selection if you're setting out to make a derivative movie, but this, The Thing, doesn't quite understand what makes each of those films work. The movie also ends with another callback to the original The Thing. The original's ending is pretty ambiguous and very bleak, but this one's isn't. First of all, it basically confirms that Kate makes it out of the ordeal alive.
There's a Russian station about 50 miles from here. Should have enough gas.
And second of all, there's naturally some suspicion about whether or not Carter has been thinged, because the two characters have been separated for some time, but the movie then unambiguously confirms those suspicions twice over. First with this.
You know how I knew you were human? When you showed it back at base? Your earring. It was your other ear.
And then with an inhuman thing scream when he's getting torched. This doesn't even make any sense. The thing assimilates the victim's knowledge and personality too, right? So they'd know which ear the earring belongs to, and they'd also probably have put the earring back on after assimilation. I mean, he's wearing clothes. That's not organic material. Wouldn't it have been a much better ending if we still got this earring line, then he grabbed the correct ear even though it's missing an earring, and then they drove off not trusting each other? Or better yet, if after Carter grabs the correct ear, Kate torches him anyway, and then drives off potentially having just murdered him in cold blood as a precaution? We do end up with one final sequence in this movie that ties together the end of this one with the beginning of the original. And I actually thought that this was really cute. But it also was a stark reminder of how much more I care about the roster of characters at the other base. Although I did refer to a few of the characters in this movie by name already, I had to look those up. The only character names I actually remember are Kate and Lars. I didn't even remember this guy's name, and he's like the protagonist's sidekick. At least I vaguely know that he's a helicopter guy, and he has a black helicopter guy friend. There was also a third American helicopter guy, but I forgot he even existed after the first time I watched this movie, and I certainly don't remember his name. Actually, I don't even recall what any of these other guys' jobs are. There's just a series of that guys lining up to get gobbled up by things. So, what to make of The Thing? Well, I found it extremely derivative, but it was also kind of fun. Honestly, if you like any one of The Thing from Another World, Alien, or the original The Thing, you'll almost certainly have a good time watching this. It's not going to blow your hair back, and you probably won't be interested in watching it more than just once, but it's a decent time. If anything, I'd say this movie proves that the people who made it are actually very talented. They just need good, original material to work with. So now that we've seen what each The Thing is offering, which one comes out on top? Well, I gotta go with the original here. Even if it doesn't quite impact me the same way it does its diehard fans, it's clearly a very well-crafted film. And while the prequel is fun, at the end of the day, it spent all of its time mimicking well-established, excellent movies instead of trying to carve out its own space. I feel like that inevitably restricts how good it's gonna be. Also, I've seen the original a few times now, and it's always been a pleasant rewatch, but even just my second viewing of the prequel was kinda tedious. So what should the prequel be called? What about First Things First, or Thing Origins? Before the Thing? You know what, while we're on the topic, I just want to say that The Thing is a god-awful name for a movie. I can't think of a single movie that doesn't have a thing in it. I was gonna suggest maybe Marcel Duchamp's Anemic Cinema, but no, that's most definitely a thing. So it sucks that the prequel is called The Thing, but it also sucks that the original is called The Thing. I also had this problem with Prey. That's an awful name. It doesn't even particularly make sense for that game's story. But naming this movie is kinda tricky. I can see why they abandoned the name Who Goes There, because that sounds like a delightful comedy of mistaken identity and not a paranoid gore fest. I think The Thing from Another World is pretty solid, but obviously that's taken. We could look at games that have been inspired by this movie. Among Us is pretty good, but I think that name's been permanently ruined by memes, so it's kind of hard to say for sure. Distrust and Frigid are both one-worders and a bit too on the nose, so they're no good. Pole of Cold is kind of awful. Buried in Ice is probably the best out of all of these, but it's a bit mundane. It doesn't really have any mystique or pizzazz to it. One tried and true naming scheme for pulpy stories like this is event, preposition, place, number. It's immediately evocative and memorable, like Assault on Precinct 13, which was so good that Assault on VA 33 copied it, or Danger on Flight 534, or Vanishing on 7th Street. That's close enough. Regardless of how good these movies are, the names are slam dunks. Or how about Infection at Outpost 31? Hey, wait a second. Yeah, so this board game has a better name than the movie it's based on. But if the original should be called The Thing Infection at Outpost 31, I still don't really know what to call the prequel. The Thing Infection at Tool Station? Or maybe The Frickin' Thing's Alive?
The frickin' thing's alive!
Actually, The Thing Lives isn't even that bad, but honestly I keep coming back to The Thing Origins. It is a really unimaginative commercial name, but it's kind of an unimaginative commercial movie, so... Alright, that's it. Thanks for watching and happy Halloween. Tune in next time for Ants, Apples, and Communists.
I know you gentlemen have been through a lot. And when you find the time, I'd rather not spend the rest of this winter tied to this fucking couch!
So it's a COVID-19 movie.